most striking ones are, of course, Qanon and Pizzagate, because they are very politically motivated. QAnon, the conspiracy that there's a deep state fighting against Trump. So it doesn't name President Trump except in connection with QAnon, nor does it say that the president has inspired conspiracy theories, but it does seem to allude to that. I think others do think that the internet has, by linking people together, it actually has increased them, or at least the spread of them. I guess the lesson is conspiracy theorists are everywhere.
We call it the wrap-up smear. If you want to talk politics, you call it the wrap-up smear. You smear somebody with falsehoods and all the rest, and then you merchandise it. And then you write it, and they'll say, see, it's reported in the press that this, and this, so they have that validation that the press reported the smear, and then it's called the wrap-up smear. Now I'm going to merchandise the press's report on the smear that we made. And it's a tactic.
So you said earlier this week about the Russia investigation, quote, you really have to be trying to look away to say there's no evidence of collusion here.
The Russians offered help. The campaign accepted help. The Russians gave help, and the president made full use of that help. There is significant evidence, much of it in the public domain, on the issue of collusion. I think there's plenty of evidence of collusion or conspiracy in plain sight.
There is more than circumstantial evidence now, so again, I think...
So you have seen direct evidence of collusion?
I don't want to go into specifics, but I will say that there is evidence that is not circumstantial.
This week, we saw cold, hard evidence of the Trump campaign, indeed the Trump family, eagerly intending to collude, possibly, with Russia. Republicans in Congress have become enablers of the Trump-Russia assault on our democracy.
Yeah. This is my last election for you. Yeah. And after my election, I have more flexibility. Yeah. Yeah. I understand. I transmit this information to Vladimir and understand what.
You take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you.
I think spying did occur. Yes, I think spying did occur.
So I got Ukraine, and I remember going over convincing our team, or others too, convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over for, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I said, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I looked, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired.
House Democrats have been examining whether the president and his attorney, Rudy Giuliani, sought to manipulate the Ukrainian government into helping the Trump re-election campaign. They were doing that before this complaint. Now, something that may seem confusing as you go through the facts tonight is that the subject phone call that we now know took place in this time frame that people are looking at. When this complaint came in, who did the president speak to? Who was a leader at that time? He spoke to the president of Ukraine. Now, that call was already the subject of curiosity by Congress because they were looking into these earlier efforts, in part announced by Mr. Giuliani about his intentions of trying to get to Ukraine to figure out some things about some of Mr. Trump's political opponents. So that's where it stands. We happen to have the man in the middle tonight, the president's counselor, former mayor Rudy Giuliani. Good to have you on the show.
I'm glad I'm on tonight because what you just said is totally erroneous. Every single thing you just said is completely spun in the same direction you've been doing for 2 years with these, oh, tonight Papadopoulos is going to prove Russian collusion. Let me tell you what happened, okay?
Yes.
What happened is that I was investigating, going back to last year, complaints that the Ukrainian people, several people in Ukraine, knew about a tremendous amount of collusion between Ukrainian officials and Hillary Clinton and the Democratic National Committee, including a completely fraudulent document that was produced in order to begin the investigation of Manafort. They were trying to get to us, but they were being blocked by the ambassador, who was an Obama appointee in Ukraine, who was holding back this information. In the course of investigating that, I found out this incredible story about Joe Biden, that he bribed the president of the Ukraine in order to fire a prosecutor who was investigating his son. That is an astounding scandal of major proportions, which all of you have covered up for about 5 or 6 months. You've also covered up the fact that Biden and his son took $1.5 billion out of China, and that's why the president thinks you're a corrupt media. Because if this were President Trump and Donald Trump Jr., and they took millions of dollars from a corrupt oligarch in the Ukraine, and they took $1.5 billion out of China while the president was negotiating with China, you would be screaming and yelling and going crazy about how corrupt it is. And because it's Joe Biden and he's a protected Democrat, you don't cover it. This scandal is a scandal of major proportion.
Why did you back away from the trip when it got scrutiny?
Because
why did you wind up meeting in Spain
because
instead of Ukraine?
I was told that the people at the meeting with the president were people who worked for George Soros, and George Soros had been funding this whole thing from the very, very beginning.
Do you have proof that Soros was funding it?
I absolutely do.
How so?
I have proof. Okay. George Soros had a not-for-profit called Antac. Antac is the one that developed all of the dirty information that ended up being a false document that was created in order to incriminate Manafort.
Do you have the proof of that that's who found all the things?
December 16th, 2018, there is a finding by a court in the Ukraine that a man named Teleshenko, something like that, that he produced a phony affidavit that was given to the American authorities and an FBI agent named Greenwood, and they found him guilty of that. Nobody reports that in the United States because you don't report things that are favorable to the president and negative to Democrats. I'm telling you the truth. The prosecutor was removed because he was investigating the son, and he was investigating Soros's charity, or whatever the hell it was, Antac. The new prosecutor that came in dismissed both cases. And
the prosecutor who was pushed out was unanimously seen as corrupt, by the way.
No, he wasn't. He wasn't unanimously seen as corrupt. That's an after-the-fact statement. If you listen to Joe Biden's tape, he convicts himself.
Did you ask the Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden?
No, actually I didn't. I asked the Ukraine to investigate the allegations that there was interference in the election of 2016 by the Ukrainians for the benefit of Hillary Clinton, for which there already is a court finding.
You never asked anything about Hunter Biden. You never asked anything about Joe Biden.
The only thing I asked about Joe Biden is to get to the bottom of how it was that Lutsenko, who was appointed, dismissed the case against Antac.
So you did ask Ukraine to look into Joe Biden?
Of course I did.
You just said you didn't.
No, I didn't ask him to look into Joe Biden. I asked him to look into the allegations that related to my client, which tangentially involved Joe Biden in a massive bribery scheme, not unlike what he did in China. I asked them to investigate the allegations that relate to the false charges against the President of the United States. Those allegations tangentially involve Biden. You are a sellout.
You are telling me that I'm a sellout.
These are crimes of major proportions. And because they're Democrats, you won't cover it. A $1.5 million investment by China in Biden's private equity fund, and the partners
I'm not saying that these types of things shouldn't be looked at.
Whitey Bulger's nephew. Do you know that they were partners with Whitey Bulger's nephew?
Shouldn't be
and
looked
your
at.
corrupt media won't cover it because he's a Democrat. The crime of bribery is if I offer something of value to someone in return for their official action. Joe Biden offered him a $1.2 billion loan guarantee in return for him firing a prosecutor. That is
and you have proof that it was a quid pro quo situation, and you can show it.
Yeah, you know what the proof is? Joe Biden, 2018, January, in front of the Council on Foreign Relations, saying the whole thing.
He said, I'm going to give you this money if you get rid of this prosecutor.
100%. Exactly.
Send me the transcript.
Go listen to it. You cannot offer something of value in exchange for official action. Crime over with. Motive, the kid was under investigation because he had gotten $6 billion for the most crooked Ukrainian oligarch.
Obviously,
a guy named
if they
Moshevsky.
Could have...
I don't even need affidavits. All I need is Joe Biden's statement on television that he told the president of the Ukraine, I'm going to hold back the $1.2 billion.
And he said it had nothing to do...
I'm going to finish this sentence. I'm going to hold back the $1.2 billion. If you don't fire the prosecutor, that is the crime of bribery in every country in the world. If the president of the United States said to the president of Ukraine, investigate the corruption in your country that has a bearing on our 2016 election, isn't that what he's supposed to do?
What if he said, I have $250 million that you want?
If he said that?
Why don't you investigate what's happening with Joe Biden and what's happening and what you did to me in 2016, and I'll give you the $250.
Isn't that exactly what Joe Biden did?
Go
the
ahead.
fact is, what you're saying to me is completely equivalent with what Joe Biden admitted on tape 2 years ago and you didn't cover, which is, I told the president of the Ukraine, you're not going to get your $1.2 billion unless you fire the prosecutor. How come you didn't cover that? How come I wasn't called on here the night that happened? Because you're not fair.
You
don't
premise
think
for the
there's a deep
question.
state?
Listen.
Of course there is.
I think there's a little bit of a deep state.
I think your network is
I know.
corrupt.
I heard you. What you were doing for him in the Ukraine.
Honest,
he only knew after.
Someone came to me, a very well-respected investigator, American citizen, and told me that in Ukraine, there were a number of allegations of interference in the 2016 election that appear to be real and truthful, unlike the Russian collusion hoax. They were afraid to go to the FBI because they had been turned down so often, and one of the central figures in it is a FBI agent who appears to be involved in the gathering of dirt, work with a particular company owned by George Soros that was collecting this information. That company is one of the companies where Biden's bribery of Poroshenko, he got that case dismissed. People were ignoring that Biden played a role in getting these collusion allegations covered up by having the case against Antac dismissed. So it was all one piece. The reason I investigated it is, as his defense lawyer, it's my job to show if there's an alternative explanation that proves him innocent. I got it to the point, let me finish. I got it to the point of affidavits. I put them all online.
CBS News and our partners BBC in Ukraine went to the prosecutor general to ask him specifically about the Biden questions you're raising, the current one. Sergei Lysenko, who is one of the advisors to the current president, we also spoke off camera to the prosecutor general, who said there was no evidence there.
Margaret, this is exceedingly embarrassing. Mr. Lysenko has been fired by the current president. Mr. Lysenko is exactly the prosecutor that Joe Biden put in order to tank the case.
Prosecutor General we spoke with off camera as well, and he had to the Washington Post and other organizations said that he didn't have evidence.
Maybe you all are so blinded because this is a Democrat, you're not doing your job properly. The prosecutor general you should have spoken to is the one who was fired, who has said in this affidavit that he was fired specifically because he was investigating Joe Biden's son. This has been online for 6 months, and the Washington media just closes their eyes to it. That's the wrong prosecutor general you're talking to. I invite your reporters, who I'm sure are interested in digging out corruption, to see if this isn't corroborated by 3 other prosecutors who say the same thing. The one that you interviewed is the one who was corrupted. And there are a lot of allegations about
I want to ask you about something that has developed in the past few hours,
including against Soros.
You just heard Tom Bossert right there. He says if you keep pushing this conspiracy theory that he says has been debunked, you're going to bring the president down.
With all due respect to Tom Bossert, he doesn't know what he's talking about. That I invented this. This was given to me. was given to me in November.
He says intelligence agencies debunked it. He told the president that more than 2 years ago.
Oh, you were talking about that CrowdStrike thing?
Yeah.
That isn't the only thing he asked about. What he's asking about here is...
Let's focus on that first, though. I mean, do you accept that it's debunked? Will you stop peddling it?
I've never peddled it. You ever hear me talk about CrowdStrike? I've never peddled it. Tom Bossett doesn't know what he's talking about. I've never engaged in any theory that the Ukrainians did the hacking. In fact, when this was first presented to me, I pretty clearly understood the Ukrainians didn't do the hacking. But that doesn't mean the Ukrainians didn't do anything. November of 2016, they first came to me and they said, we have shocking evidence that the collusion that they claim happened in Russia, which didn't happen, happened in the Ukraine, and it happened with Hillary Clinton. George Soros was behind it. George Soros' company was funding it.
But you accept now that that's not true?
I accept that it is true. I can prove it. There are affidavits to prove that they were colluding with the Ukrainians, conspiring with the Ukrainians. There's a specific person in the DNC who was designated to get this information. There are 5 Ukrainian witnesses under oath saying it that are online, and if you had any regard for equal justice under the law, you would be looking for those. Well, let me ask the following question to anybody at home. If I change the names of Joe Biden and Hunter Biden to Donald Trump and Donald Trump Jr., 8 million from Ukraine while under investigation, 1.5 billion from China while negotiating with China, would I be sitting here? George, please let me finish my sentence.
But you just made
I know it's a damaging sentence.
There's no evidence that they've gotten $1.5 billion.
There's evidence that they got $1 billion directly from China, specific date, 12 days after they returned from a trip to China. There's evidence that another 500 million went in, and there are 3 partners, Rosemont Seneca, that's Hunter Biden, and the stepson of the Secretary of State. The second partner is the Bank of China. And the third partner is a company called Thornton Group. The $1.5 billion was in a company that was specially established called Bohai Harvest Rosemont Seneca, or some crazy name like that. The partners were Joe Biden's son, John Kerry's stepson, the Bank of China, 1/3 partner at least, and the Thornton Group that was owned by Whitey Bulger's nephew. The name here was Donald Trump and Donald Trump Jr. And it said that the president of the Ukraine asked me to resign due to pressure from the U.S. presidential administration. The truth is that I was forced out because I was leading a wide-ranging corruption probe into Burisma Holdings and Joe Biden's son. That's under oath by the prosecutor who was handling the case. These are affidavits.
From individuals who are implicated who have been and who.
Isn't that the way we prosecute crime? With people implicated?
That will be part of the investigation that the House is conducting.
How about if I tell you over the next week 4 more of these will come out from 4 other prosecutors?
And they will all be investigated. Meantime,
no, George, they won't be, because they've been online for 6 months. This is not about getting Joe Biden in trouble. This is about proving that Donald Trump was framed by the Democrats.
The president picked the head of the FBI. The president picked the head of the Justice Department. If they're serious,
well, William Barr wasn't at the Justice Department.
He's there now.
Well, I'm not telling you whether they are or aren't investigating it. I'm telling you, look, I got this a long time ago, in November of 2018. Very serious concerns at that time by the Ukrainian prosecutors about the FBI. So I decided to go another way. Also because if I went to the FBI or I went to the Justice Department.
You've never done that?
I'm not saying I did or I didn't, but if I did it at that time.
Well, what's the answer? Did you or didn't you?
I've never initiated going to them for a simple reason. Schiff would claim I was exercising my influence to get it investigated. So here's what I did. I put it online. I announced it. I went on every place and said, I have this evidence. And I waited for them to come and get it on their own. So I didn't get a charge that I was trying to force an investigation they didn't want to do. But if you just bother to Google, I made it easy to make this case.
Mr. Mayor,
put it together. Why is this less credible than the whistleblower when this is direct knowledge and the whistleblower is hearsay? Why is Kalyunuk's statement not credible evidence when he went on the oath? Why isn't Kuliak's statement not
credible evidence when he went under oath?
You'll have to ask that to the Ukrainian authorities and our own Justice Department, which is not prosecuting. But I do have to move on.
Who says
our
Justice Department isn't prosecuting?
You believe the Justice Department is investigating?
I don't know. If they're not, it would be
There's no
kind
evidence
of surprising. Trump didn't do that. He called him up and he said, I want you to investigate these charges of corruption. If he hadn't asked them to investigate Biden, he would have violated Article 2, Section 3 of the Constitution. And I also know if Obama had called Biden in when the New York Times first broke the story in December of 2015 that his son had a massive conflict of interest working for the most corrupt oligarch in Russia, in Ukraine, if Obama had called him in like a president who understood Article 2, Section 3, and said, Joe, what the heck are you doing with your son who just got tossed out of the military where I had to pull strings to get him in? Your son is working for the biggest crook, listen to me, the biggest crook in Ukraine, and we're trying to fix corruption in Ukraine, and you got him working for Mykola Zlochevsky, who stole $5 billion?
Mr. Mayor, you've made your case.
Did Obama do that?
Did
Obama do that? Believe it or not, I'm an attorney. Everything I did was to defend my client. I am proud of what I did, and I am proud of having uncovered what will turn out to be a massive pay-for-play scheme, not unlike the Clinton Foundation.
So will you cooperate?
And then we got to look at the $1.5 billion from China.
You keep on throwing out the charges.
And the two other places that Hunter Biden went to sell his father's office.
Will you cooperate?